3 days. That's all the time doctors gave her to live. But what happened next would challenge everything we think we know about the boundaries between science and faith, between the possible and the impossible. This is the story of a woman who faced death's door and walked back through it, not through medicine, not through surgery, but through something far more mysterious and profound. When the machines started beeping that final warning, when the medical team began preparing her family for the inevitable, nobody could have predicted what would unfold over the next 40 days. What you're about to hear is just another feel-good story. It is a documented case that has left doctors questioning their own understanding of healing, of life, and of forces beyond their medical training. Her name was Sarah, and she was dying. But death, it seems, wasn't ready for Sarah yet. The diagnosis that changed everything, it started with what Sarah thought was just exhaustion. Working 2 jobs to support her family, she attributed her fatigue to stress, to long hours, the weight of responsibility she carried on her shoulders. But when the fainting spells began, when her body started failing in ways she couldn't ignore, the tests revealed a truth more terrifying than she could have imagined. Stage 4, cancer. Aggressive, metastasized. The oncologist's S-words hung in the air like a death sentence. "We can make you comfortable, but there's nothing more we can do." The tumors had spread throughout her body like wildfire, consuming healthy tissue and leaving behind a landscape of destruction that modern medicine simply couldn't reverse. But Sarah wasn't ready to accept that verdict. Neither was her community. When medicine reaches its limits, Dr. Harrison had been practicing oncology for 23 years. He had delivered difficult news countless times, had watched families grapple with impossible situations, had seen the human spirit tested in ways that would break most people. But there was something different about Sarah's case that troubled him deeply. The speed of progression was unlike anything he'd seen. The cancer wasn't just aggressive. It was almost supernatural in its destructive power. Lab results that should have taken weeks to change were transforming overnight. Her body was shutting down system by system, and every medical intervention they attempted seemed to accelerate rather than slow the process. "In all my years of practice," Dr. Harrison would later say, "I had never seen a case where the patient's condition deteriorated so rapidly, while simultaneously showing such an unusual response to what came next." What came next would redefine everything he thought he knew about healing. The 40-day journey begins when Sarah's pastor, Father Michael, heard about her condition. He didn't just offer condolences or empty comfort. He proposed something that seemed almost audacious in the face of such medical certainty. 40 days of continuous prayer, fasting, and spiritual intervention, not just from Sarah's immediate family, but from their entire community and beyond. The number 40 wasn't chosen randomly. In biblical tradition, 40 represents a period of testing, transformation, and divine intervention. Moses spent 40 days on Mount Sinai. Jesus fasted for 40 days in the wilderness. Noah weathered the flood for 40 days and nights. If God was going to intervene in Sarah's situation, Father Michael reasoned, they needed to create the spiritual conditions for that intervention to occur. What started as a small group of believers quickly grew into something unprecedented. Word spread through social media, through prayer chains, through networks of faith communities across the country and eventually around the world. By day 10, thousands of people were participating in what had become known as Sarah's 40 days. But the most remarkable thing was, on the scale of the prayer movement, it was what began happening in that hospital room. The impossible begins. Date: Sarah's vital signs, which had been steadily declining for weeks, suddenly stabilized. The nurses attributed it to a temporary rally, the body's last surge before the final decline. But Dr. Harrison noticed something in her blood work that didn't make sense. Certain markers that should have been astronomical were beginning to decrease. Day 18. Sarah opened her eyes and spoke clearly for the first time in a week. She asked for water, then food. Her appetite, which had vanished completely, was returning. The medical staff exchanged glances, but remained cautiously skeptical. They had seen false hopes before. Day 25. The impossible became undeniable. A new CT scan showed something that made the radiologist call in 2 colleagues to verify what they were seeing. Tumors that had been growing aggressively were not just stable. They were shrinking. Not slowly, not marginally, but dramatically. The largest mass had reduced by 60% in less than 2 weeks. Dr. Harrison found himself facing a situation he had never encountered in his career. A patient who was defying every medical expectation, not through experimental treatment or cutting-edge therapy, but through what could only be described as spontaneous remission of an unprecedented scale. The scientific community takes notice. News of Sarah's recovery began to spread beyond her local hospital. Medical journals started investigating. Researchers from prestigious universities requested access to her case files. The story that emerged was unjust about one woman's miraculous recovery. It was about the complex relationship between faith, community support, and physical healing. Dr. Jennifer Wells, a researcher at Johns Hopkins who specializes in the intersection of spirituality and medicine, became fascinated by Sarah's case. What we're seeing here challenges our understanding of the healing process, she explained. While we can't prove that prayer directly caused the physiological changes, we can't ignore the correlation between the spiritual intervention and the remarkable recovery. The timing was too precise to dismiss. The community prayer initiative had begun on the exact day Sarah's condition started to stabilize. The most dramatic improvements coincided with the peak participation in the prayer movement, and the final medical confirmation of her complete recovery occurred on day 40. Not day 41, but precisely on the 40th day of coordinated spiritual intervention. The role of community and belief. But Sarah's story is not just about individual faith. It is about the power of collective belief and community support. Research has shown that patients with strong social support systems tend to have better health outcomes, but what happened with Sarah went far beyond conventional social support. The prayer network that formed around her case created what sociologists call a healing community, a group united by shared intention and focused energy toward a specific outcome. Messages of hope and faith poured in from around the world. People who had never met Sarah were fasting, praying, and holding vigil for her recovery. Sarah herself later described feeling surrounded by an almost tangible sense of love and support, even during her darkest moments when she was barely conscious. "I could feel them," she said, "thousands of people I'd never met, all focusing their faith and hope on my healing. It was like being held by invisible hands." This phenomenon raises fascinating questions about the nature of healing itself. If the mind and spirit can influence physical health, and growing scientific evidence suggests they can, then what happens when thousands of minds and spirits unite with singular focus and intention? The skeptics and the believers. Not everyone was convinced that Sarah's recovery represented divine intervention. Dr. Robert Chun, an oncologist and medical researcher, offered alternative explanations. Spontaneous remission, while rare, does occur in cancer patients. The human immune system is capable of remarkable responses under certain conditions. We may simply be witnessing an extreme but natural biological process. But even the skeptics couldn't ignore the timing and the completeness of Sarah's recovery. Traditional spontaneous remission typically occurs gradually over months or years. Sarah's transformation happened in precisely 40 days, with improvements that coincided almost perfectly with specific prayer milestones. Father Michael, who had initiated the prayer campaign, saw the criticism as missing the point entirely. Whether you call it divine intervention, spontaneous remission, or the power of positive thinking, something extraordinary happened here. A dying woman is now completely healthy. Instead of debating the mechanism, perhaps we should focus on what we can learn from this experience. The debate between skeptics and believers continues, but Sarah's case has sparked serious academic research into the relationship between spirituality and healing, research that may eventually bridge the gap between these two perspectives. The medical mystery continues. 2 years after her 40-day journey, Sarah remains cancer-free. Follow-up scans show no trace of the disease that was supposed to kill her in 3 days. Her case has been documented in medical literature as one of the most dramatic and well-documented cases of spontaneous remission in modern medical history. Dr. Harrison, who was initially skeptical of any non-medical explanations, has become more open to the possibility that healing involves factors beyond pharmaceutical intervention. Sarah's case has taught me that medicine doesn't have all the answers. We understand the mechanisms of disease far better than we understand the mechanisms of healing. Perhaps it is time we started studying hope and faith with the same rigor we applied to studying illness. The hospital where Sarah was treated has since established a program that integrates spiritual care with medical treatment, recognizing that healing involves the whole person. Body, mind, and spirit. Other medical institutions are beginning to follow suit, acknowledging that the Sarah phenomena represents something they need to understand better. Lessons from the Impossible Sarah story teaches us several profound lessons about the nature of healing and the power of human connection. First, it demonstrates that healing is not always a purely medical process. While we must never abandon proven medical treatments, we also cannot ignore the role that faith, hope, and community support play in recovery. Second, it shows us the extraordinary power of collective intention. When thousands of people unite with a common purpose, when they focus their energy and faith toward a specific outcome, something remarkable can happen. Whether you attribute this to divine intervention, the placebo effect, or quantum entanglement, the results speak for themselves. Third, Sarah Sejuni reminds us that miracles, however we define them, may be more common than we think. Perhaps what we call miraculous is simply the natural result of conditions we don't yet fully understand. Perhaps the boundary between the possible and impossible is far more fluid than our scientific worldview suggests. The ripple effect Sarah's recovery didn't just save one life, it inspired a movement. The prayer network that formed around her case has continued, now focusing on other people facing impossible medical situations. They call themselves the 40-Day Warriors, and they've documented dozens of cases where focused prayer and community support have coincided with unexpected medical improvements. Medical professionals who witnessed Sarah's transformation have started approaching their practice differently, paying more attention to their patients' spiritual and emotional needs alongside their physical symptoms. Some hospitals have established formal prayer programs, while others have created spaces for meditation and spiritual reflection. The story has also sparked a new field of research called theistic medicine, the scientific study of how religious and spiritual practices affect physical health outcomes. Universities are establishing departments dedicated to this research, and the National Institutes of Health has begun funding studies in this area. Sarah herself has become an advocate for integrative healing approaches, speaking at medical conferences and faith gatherings about her experience. She doesn't claim to have all the answers, but she insists that her story proves healing is possible, even when medical science says otherwise. The ultimate question as we come to the end of Sarah's remarkable journey, we're left with profound questions that challenge our understanding of life, death, and the nature of reality itself. Did thousands of prayers somehow alter Sarah's physical condition? Was her recovery the result of faith activating her body's natural healing mechanisms? Or did we witness something that transcends our current understanding of both science and spirituality? Perhaps the answer doesn't matter as much as the impact. Sarah is alive, healthy, and thriving. A community came together in unprecedented unity and love. Medical professionals have been inspired to think beyond their traditional boundaries, and countless people around the world have been reminded that hope, faith, and collective action can accomplish things that seem impossible. In a world that often feels divided and hopeless, Sarah's story offers something precious. Proof that love, faith, and community can still work miracles. Whether those miracles come from God, from the power of the human spirit, or from forces we don't yet understand, they remind us that the impossible is often just the possible waiting for the right conditions. Sarah's 40 days of prayer didn't just heal her body. They healed something in all of us, restoring our belief that miracles can still happen, that communities can still come together, and that sometimes, just sometimes, love really can conquer all. What do you think? Have you ever witnessed something that challenged your understanding of what's possible? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because stories of hope and healing are what the world needs more of right now. Together, we can spread these messages of possibility to everyone who needs to hear them.